Hello, everybody, and welcome to Final Take. I'm Michael Scott, and boy, do I have a great show lined up for you guys today. Happy Tuesday, everybody. We are back here. We got the NFL Draft 2 days away. There's a lot of rumors and a lot of speculation going around. We're going to touch base on that. Also, I don't know if you guys got a chance to watch it this past Sunday, but ESPN aired The Last Dance, chronicling Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls' final season together in 97 and 98. There's been plenty of news coming out of that. And we're also going to talk a little bit about Rob Gronkowski and the DeAndre Hopkins trade and feud with Bill O'Brien that continues. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the podcast. Let's get it going, baby! So, first things first, the Cleveland Browns are rumored to be interested in a trade for Redskins' Trent Brown. This news came via ESPN's Josina Anderson earlier today on her Instagram page. Anderson said, "I'm told acquiring Trent Williams is still on the table for the Browns, per sources. Now, nothing is imminent or super close right now," she says, "but the Browns are keeping their thumb on the situation, meaning something still may or may not happen with Trent before or after the draft." Now, when I think about this news, a couple of questions really come to mind. For one, let's be completely honest about it. Both of these parties need a clean break and a fresh start. Ron Rivera doesn't want this hanging over the team's head during his inaugural season. This issue with Trent Williams and the Washington Redskins was a big drama fest, and it plagued the team over the course of the year last season, on top of all the other problems they had, firing their head coach, Dwayne Haskins not being ready to play in the NFL. There was a lot going on, so it's no surprise that the franchise has made this shift to Ron Rivera, and now you want to get off to a fresh start. You don't want the stale, nasty, reeking stench of the last regime carrying over. Now, the trust factor between Williams and the organization's medical staff has dissipated since last season's cancer scare. They had a misdiagnosis there. Obviously, they had suggested that it was just a growth on Williams' head. Well, when he went and got his own medical expertise to take a look at it, obviously he learned that it was possibly cancerous, and he was extremely upset. At times, he refused to play for the team, and it's a whole nother issue that we could dive into. The point is, this young man is very talented, and he needs a fresh start. So what you really have here is a win-win for all the parties involved, right? Williams gets to potentially move on to Cleveland, who needs a tackle to help protect Baker Mayfield. The Browns' offensive line was absolutely dreadful last season. And the Redskins are likely to net draft picks in return to help new head coach Ron Rivera improve the team quicker. So it works for everybody involved, right? The Browns think that they have a playoff caliber team. They just need to surround Mayfield with some protection so he can get the ball to those receivers like Jarvis Landry and OBJ. Now, the Browns are rumored to be interested in trading down for tackle Ezra Cleveland from Boise State. In my opinion, it may be something that really, gets your blood flowing a little bit, but it's not the type of move that's going to solidify Baker Mayfield's backside and give him that confidence that he's got all day long to throw to those fantastic wide receivers that he's got at his disposal. If I'm the Browns GM, if I'm Baker Mayfield, and if I'm a Cleveland fan, you can bet your bottom dollar that I'm going out and I'm making the trade for Williams as opposed to trading that pick down to get Ezra Cleveland, because what we've seen from Williams at points is a guy who's an all-pro, who's established in the league, and he was a top 5 pick during his time. So you really can't go wrong with a young player like that. You're going to have a little bit of a difference in money factor. Obviously, Williams is going to ask for a higher salary, but let's face it, the left tackle, there's a reason it's the second highest paid position in football, because you need to protect your franchise quarterback. Now, let's switch up gears here. Rob Gronkowski is making news today because he hinted earlier at a possible NFL return. The former NFL tight end was on the Andy show and said he's not totally done playing. He said, and I quote, "I'm feeling good right now. I'm happy where I'm at. You just never know, man. You just never know. You never know. I'm not totally done." When I hear things like this, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not shocked at all. See, Rob Gronkowski likes having fun. But after a while, the party gets old. It gets a little stale. And as a competitor, you start to really crave the absence of competition. And that hunger is what's going to return you to the game. In my opinion, it's not a question of if he returns, but when and with whom. The Patriots currently own his rights for one more year. And if he were to come back and, reactivate that contract that he signed before, he'd count as $9.25 million against the cap. Now, New England can't afford that, right? At this point in time, they have just over $2 million available at their disposal. Obviously, they've been very quiet in free agency. They've let a lot of guys go, including Tom Brady. And they're hoping to really move forward with what they have to work with and grab a few more players in this draft, which they don't even have a lot of draft picks, right? So, really, if you get into a situation where Rob Gronkowski is coming back to the NFL, if you're Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots, you're looking at a situation where you're going to have to possibly trade or cut Rob Gronkowski. Now, the speculation and the rumor mill starts spinning, and people start to wonder, hey, where's Gronk going to go play if he's not playing in New England? Well, obviously, the first thing that's going to come to mind, people are going to start saying, hey, he's going to go play with Tom Brady in Tampa Bay, which makes sense, considering the Bucs are shopping O.J. Howard, the tight end, who last year didn't really seem to fit very well in Bruce Arians' scheme. They're looking to move him before the draft. And then also Tampa Bay is just a couple hour car ride away from Miami. And so obviously it makes a lot of sense. And I'm sure as time goes on we'll hear, speculation about a few other teams, but the main thing is I hope Gronk gets back on the field. He's, in my opinion, one of the best tight ends in the history of the NFL. I think he's an absolutely fantastic competitor / entertainer. And I'd love to see him in another New Jersey outside of New England where he can really spread his wings and be himself and do the best job he can. Getting back on the topic of the NFL, DeAndre Hopkins had a telephone interview today with Sports Illustrated. Now, DeAndre Hopkins was traded to the Arizona Cardinals from the Houston Texans a few weeks ago by Coach Bill O'Brien, a move that's been met with a lot of criticism. And there's been reports suggesting there was a deterioration in the relationship, which ultimately resulted in the trade. Now, Hopkins told SI when speaking about Brian during that telephone interview that there was no relationship. And he also said, make sure you put that in there. There's not a lot to speak about. Hopkins went on to tell the magazine that he knew how to get out of the situation in Houston. Hopkins said that by asking for a little raise, the team likely would instead shop him, which ultimately Hopkins told SI this is the outcome I wanted. Now, when I take a step back, I scratch my head for a second, right? But then all of a sudden, really it hits me and it becomes very clear. There's more bad blood here than meets the eye, because this story continues to have legs. Back and forth between Hopkins and O'Brien, we go. Back and forth again. And this suggests there were specific incidents, including the Aaron Hernandez snafu, that did irreconcilable damage to the player-coach relationship, right? So, obviously, it hasn't come to light yet at this point, but maybe, just maybe, there's a little more than meets the eye here. And maybe something else occurred or happened, because I find it hard to believe that after being together for 6 seasons, there's just no relationship. That it doesn't exist when you're an all-pro receiver. You can't tell me that you show up to work every day and your head coach treats you as if you're just the wide receiver. Doesn't speak with you, doesn't interact with you, blah, 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 blah. Obviously, with some of these stories like the Aaron Hernandez snafu, we've heard this isn't true. They do interact. Now, the quality of that relationship really is what I think DeAndre Hopkins is speaking of. Low quality, basically non-existent, trading greetings, coming and going. Nothing too fancy, nothing to get excited about. So, there's obviously more here than meets the eye, and I think over time that will come to light. But what I don't like is Hopkins manipulating the situation the way he did and asking for the money. Why not just come out and ask for a trade? Like, let's be a man about it, right? You're not on the rookie contract. You're in a different contract. There's plenty of guys all the time that they hold out, they ask for more money, they want to renegotiate the contract. Why don't you just come out and say that? Just be a man about it. And it really makes me think that the way Hopkins is actually handling this situation, that maybe he's more to blame for the issues than Bill O'Brien. I'm not 100% certain on that. I'm just tickling my mind here. I'm just collecting my thoughts, and I am spitballing a little bit, because really at this point, this thing has the potential to go either way, because the story's not over yet. And I fully expect to hear a rebuttal from O'Brien in the wake of this news in the TEAM mockery that was made by Hopkins, at the end of the interview. O'Brien, a few weeks ago, spelled out the letters to the word team and said he's only interested in worrying about his team. And Hopkins turned around and did the same thing at the end of this interview. So this really seems like an emotional back and forth, at least on DeAndre Hopkins' end. So it'll be interesting to see where exactly Bill O'Brien takes this and what might come of the story from here. Because any decent reporter, beat writer, or someone close to the situation is going to listen to this interview with SI, and they are definitely going to move forward and dig and dig and dig till they uncover something more. Enough of the NFL, though. Let's talk about some NBA basketball, right? So, in an interview with ESPN 104.5 Baton Rouge's Off the Bench morning show on Monday, Tim Floyd said he was flown to Seattle to talk with Chicago Bulls owner Jerry Reinsdorf about replacing Phil Jackson after the 95-96 season, a year before The Last Dance picked up the saga of disbanding the team as it headed into the 97-98 season. I don't know if you guys got a chance to watch that this past Sunday, but between the footage, the storyline, and the soundtrack, the series is shaping up to be absolutely incredible. I'm excited. It's Tuesday right now. I'm already looking forward to Sunday specifically because it's going to highlight Dennis Rodman and the Bulls, I guess, rival or back and forth with the Detroit Pistons, and it's going to show how physical the Pistons were against Michael Jordan. But let's digress back to the news, right? So in 95-96, Tim Floyd comes in for an interview. And then Bulls general manager Jerry Krause frustrations with Coach Phil Jackson were already boiling over at that point. And Krause really wanted to start a rebuild a year earlier while he could get more value for the players that were contracted through 97 and 98. So that's obviously the last year the Bulls won the championship. But he wanted to restart this rebuild prior to 96-97. So basically what we're saying is after 4 NBA titles in 6 years, Krause wanted to start the rebuild, which doesn't make a lot of sense because usually when you're in the wake of a dynasty, you want to keep that thing rolling as long as you can. So Floyd said the Bulls flew him to Seattle to meet team owner Jerry Reinsdorf, and that the two walked around downtown Seattle discussing the job. He added that Reinsdorf explained that Krause wanted Jackson out, thought Scottie Pippen was breaking down physically, and wanted the rebuild to start the right way. So upon hearing this news, I had a few questions come to mind. One we already talked about is, when you're still winning, why would you want to tear apart a dynasty? Like I said, they managed to win 4 of the last 6 NBA championships. Usually at that point in time, you are happy, you are celebrating, and basking in your success. You're not going back to the drawing board and saying, I am just so sick of this, how do we tear this team apart? I think that's a little counterproductive for what exactly you're looking to be as far as an NBA franchise goes. And really that thinking suggests that there may have been something more behind the veil. And that's what we do here. We try to explore over time and search for the truth, right? So that's our job as a journalist. So my second question here is, what young promising player were the Chicago Bulls hoping to build around at the expense of the greatest player of all time in Michael Jordan, the greatest coach of all time, Phil Jackson, who was let know prior to the 97-98 season that it would be his last season, and also at the expense of a top 50 All-NBA player of all time in Scottie Pippen? I mean, if you want to talk about a rebuild for the Chicago Bulls, we've seen how the rebuild's going. We've been watching it for the past 20 years, and it's been pitiful, right? They got off to a bad start when they drafted Duke's Trent Williams. He got a motorcycle crash, which unfortunately ended his playing career. He's over at ESPN now, doing a fantastic job as an analyst. But that was the first phase of the rebuild that, boom, that didn't work. We're going to have to go back to square one now. And then a few years later, you brought in Derrick Rose, right? And Derrick Rose was very promising. He was an MVP at one point, and it looked like the Chicago Bulls were finally starting to really turn the corner for the first time since breaking up, the Bulls 90s dynasty of Jordan, Jackson, Pippen, Rodman, Tony Kukoc, etc. There's a lot of guys. Ron Harper is in there, Steve Kerr. But it looked like for the first time in a long time with Derrick Rose, the Bulls were starting to turn the corner. Well, that didn't last either because Derrick Rose started suffering all those knee injuries. And really, at this point, the rebuild since that 90s Bulls team has been extremely piss poor. I just really don't understand these modern front offices' obsessions with wanting to force a rebuild all the time. Because I understand it. I used to be a general manager in the restaurant industry, and I've went into terrible restaurants before and done a full rebuild and changed them. And it's a very difficult job, and it does take time to go in, find out the problems, find the right people to help you fix them, and start to mold and shape a culture that's going to breed winning and success. But it's not always like that. You can go in some place where you got something here, and you just need to polish it up a little bit and coach it up, and you turn it into an instant winner. So these full-on rebuilds, they don't make a lot of sense to me. And especially when you had a winning culture like one of Phil Jackson and Michael Jordan. Obviously, you had some incredible talent there. You had some incredible coaching there. But you still had a culture of winning. You could have implemented some young guys in there through the draft and through other things to bring in people to help breed the next phase, pass on that legacy of winning instead of just tearing it all down. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And then the third question I had that, I was really thinking about was more of an idea, I guess you would say, that these actions by Reinsdorf and Krause were all emotional. They weren't really logical, right? And what we saw this past Sunday, these were episodes 1 and 2 of The Last Dance. This, I'm feeling like, is just the tip of the iceberg for the drama that will ensue over the next 8 episodes. And I think we're going to learn a lot about those Chicago Bulls. And oftentimes we celebrate Michael Jordan and those teams as being heroes. Well, it's just a hunch. But maybe, just maybe, things will take a dramatic turn and we'll start looking at them like the villains. That's all I have today. I'm Michael Scott. You've been listening to Final Take. Have a great rest of your Tuesday.